Welcome, people of God. Father Mike and I are back with our opportunity for questions and answers. We want to thank those of you who sent us questions already. We realize that after the changes that came about because of COVID-19 and some things being allowed and some not, we had to readjust our scheduling some, and we had to rethink how our show is going to be formatted. But we're happy that a lot of people enjoyed our question and answer sessions and continue to ask us to shed some light on questions for them. On the screen, you will see throughout our broadcast some opportunities of how you can send the questions to us so that your question maybe can be the next one that we discuss as we answer questions and answers together. This is Father Mike, I'm Father Matthew, and we're happy to be with you again. Father Mike, will you introduce our question that we're beginning our question and answer series part 2 with?
So, being that the election is just days away now, some of us have even already voted, we thought we'd start with this question from Regina. Seriously though, voting in this year's presidential election is going to be tough for many Catholics, including myself. Can you talk about how to vote without committing a sin? So that is going to be our question. And the way we're going to kind of do this is I'm just going to start by going over this fine document. It was released by the USCCB, our bishops in the United States, and it articulates certain principles that we have to keep in mind when voting, and then what kind of follows from those principles in terms of practical policies. And so what I'm hoping, I'm going to rely heavily on the document. I'm going to quote it extensively. I try to put some inflection in my voice so it's not boring. But what I'm hoping you see is sometimes we see the bishops, they get out there and they talk about immigration, and then we know they talk about abortion. And it seems almost like a grab bag of different positions from different political parties. And I hope we see going through this document a little bit, that in fact, they're flowing from 4 key principles, right? And so we'll go over those principles, I'll read some of the document, and then what follows from that. Okay? And then Matthew will...
Absolutely. And then there will be a follow-up to that. We're hoping that our sessions of Q&A are going to last around 20 minutes, no later than a half hour, unless it's a really, really complicated topic, and we'll warn you ahead of time for those. But it's ordinarily going to be about 20 minutes to a half hour that our sessions are going to go. And Father Mike's going to begin by talking a little bit about the American bishops and the advice that they have for us to consider in our own voting and in our own participation in government. Thank you, Father.
Thanks, Matthew. Father Matthew. I call him Matthew at the rectory. I'm sorry. So those 4 principles that I talked about: dignity of human life, subsidiarity, the common good, solidarity. And so we'll go through one at a time. So dignity of human life. This is from the document. Human life is sacred. The dignity of the human person is the foundation of a moral vision for society. Direct attacks on innocent persons, are never morally acceptable at any stage or in any condition, right? So this is a key principle, and it flows from the gospel. It's not something the bishops themselves kind of made up. The dignity of human life goes all the way back to Genesis, where we find that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. And this goes for every single human being. And because of this, life is sacred. And that's why life takes such a strong emphasis in the bishop's document. So 1, we consider the dignity of human life. 2, subsidiarity. This one's a little less straightforward, so I'm going to quote it and then try to explain it a little bit. The human person is not only sacred but also social. Full human development takes place in relationship with others. The family based on marriage between a man and a woman is the first and fundamental unit of society and a sanctuary for the creation and nurturing of children. The principle of subsidiarity, and here we go, reminds us that larger institutions in society should not overwhelm or interfere with smaller or local institutions. Yet larger institutions have essential responsibilities when the more local institutions cannot adequately protect human dignity, meet human needs, and advance the common good. So, in layman's terms, what this means is the lowest form of society, the lowest level of society that can handle a problem should handle it. Now, of course, they can't do everything. So what can be handled in the family should be handled in the family. What can be handled in the city should be taken care of by the city. What should be handled by the state, what could be handled by the state should be. So we want to solve problems at the most local level they can be. Okay, why? What does this have to do with anything? Well, you may find this from your own discourse. The farther away it is, the more disconnected, the more national, international an institution is, the more disconnected we feel from it. The more disconnected actual human, concrete persons are from it. We say things about our political opponents in Nebraska or California that we would never say about our brother and our sister. So the more local, the more personal it is. The easier it is to act with charity and love towards one another, and we have to keep this in mind. And so the more decentralized our problem solving is, the easier it is to live out the gospel when we try to tackle problems and handle disagreements. And so that is the principle of subsidiarity. The most local form of government that can handle a problem should. Next, the common good. The common good indicates the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. Okay, again, it sounds complicated. In fact, what I really want to do is contrast this with something that we might have in mind when we hear common good. So, the utilitarian sum. In the 19th century, certain philosophers started talking about utilitarian calculi, which are basically, you take all the consequences of an action, and what is the best action leads to the best consequences. Okay? So we hear common good and we might think of that. Well, I just have to make the action, make the decision that will create the best total consequences. This isn't what the common good is. You hear what it says? The sum total of social conditions which allow people to reach their fulfillment more fully and easily. We're talking about creating conditions. And again, this follows from the gospel. This follows from Scripture. We're not just made in the image and likeness of God, but we're individual persons, whereas God is a trinity of persons. And so to fulfill ourselves, to live out our identity as made in the image and likeness of God, we have to do it in a community with other persons. That's the only way we can mirror God. And so who we are by our scriptural anthropology are individuals as part of a social whole. We're not wholly individualistic. And so we have to play a role within the social whole. And again, that sounds a little complicated, but think of a sports team. Of course, hockey is the best sport, so I will use hockey. Right? If I am a center, right, I'm an offenseman, well, I might just want to score goals because that's going to look flashy, and I could score 60, 70 goals, and I'd make all the newspapers. But in order to be an effective center, I also have to play defense, and so I have to turn some of my attention to play defense. That's what will actually help the team. That's what will help foster the common good for the team. As an extension of that, and what's actually interesting is that's part of being a good center. So similarly, being a good member of a social whole is contributing to the common good, doing what will help create those conditions. And that's why we pay taxes, for instance, and allow some of those taxes to go to create infrastructure. Roads and hospitals and schools are good for the whole community. And so part of playing my role in the social whole is making that contribution. So that's what the common good is. I play my role as a member of a social whole. I put the interests of that social whole into my calculation, and I try to build a community in which each person can flourish. Lastly, solidarity, and this is pretty straightforward. We are one human family Whatever our national, racial, ethnic, economic, and ideological differences, we are our brothers and sisters' keepers, wherever they may be. Okay. As I say, everybody is made in the image and likeness of God, regardless of race, ethnicity, country. Any division we want to put on it does not cut through that fact. And so we have obligations to everybody, all right, just based on, again, anthropology based in Scripture. So we have those 4 principles. Now, what follows from it? First, dignity of life. And again, I'm reading from the document. Abortion and euthanasia have become preeminent threats to human life and dignity because they attack life itself, the most fundamental good and condition for all others. So we hear that, abortion, euthanasia. Also assisted suicide. And so we kind of know this. When we hear this and it sounds like, okay, these are kind of more right-leaning positions that follow from the dignity of human life. But also listen to this. Genocide, torture, direct and intentional targeting of non-combatants in war or terrorists are always wrong. Catholic teaching calls us to oppose torture, unjust wars, indiscriminate use of drones, prevent genocide, oppose racism, oppose human trafficking. And also, the Church has accepted the death penalty in the past for particularly egregious crimes when they are a threat to society and no alternative was available. But our nation's continued reliance on the death penalty cannot be justified because those conditions have changed. We no longer need the death penalty to keep us safe. And so because life is sacred, because of the dignity of life, we're called to oppose the death penalty. Okay, because of the sacredness of human life, we're called to oppose unjust wars. Because of the sacredness of life, we're called to oppose unjust tactics within wars. So the same principle, this idea of life, flows from this, the bishop's opposition to unjust war and opposition to abortion follow. So common good. The family founded upon marriage is the basic cell of human society. The role, responsibilities, and needs of families should be central national priorities. Marriage must be defined, recognized, and protected as lifelong exclusive commitment between a man and a woman and as the source of the next generation and the protective haven for children. This is a consideration of the common good. It's the infrastructure. So the bishops aren't trying to legislate private morality. Rather, they see marriage as the fundamental building block of society. And so governments and societies have the obligation to create the conditions of encouraging a stable marriage, a stable institution of marriage within that society. That follows from the common good. So again, a little right-leaning. But also, care for creation is also a moral issue. Protecting the land, water, and air we share is a religious duty of stewardship and reflects our responsibility to born and unborn children who are the most vulnerable to environmental assault. Our conference offers a distinctive call to seriously address global climate change, focusing on the virtue of prudence, pursuit of the common good, and the impact on the poor. All right, so common good also leads us to take seriously our responsibility to the environment. Solidarity, preferential option for the poor. I'm just going to go quickly because I think I'm running out of time. What am I doing for time here? All right, so we're just going to go quickly. So we should foster the creation of jobs for all who can work with good working conditions and just wages. There's the right to organize. Welfare policy should reduce poverty and dependency, strengthen family life. All right, this is also important. So I'm going to read some of this. This is on migration. The gospel mandate to welcome the stranger requires Catholics to care for and to stand with newcomers, authorized and unauthorized, including unaccompanied immigrant children, refugees, and asylum seekers, those unnecessarily detained and victims of human trafficking. Comprehensive reform is urgently necessary to fix a broken immigration system and should include a broad and fair legalization program with a path to citizenship. Okay, Bishop's opinion on immigration. It flows from this principle of solidarity. Its opposition to discrimination. Where the effects of past discrimination persist, society has the obligation to take positive steps to overcome the legacy of injustice. This is from the Bishop's document. I'm lost in my pages. So we have a care for creation. I already said that. Okay, I'm just going to end with this. In reference to solidarity, a special emphasis must be given to the Church's preferential option for the poor. While the common good embraces all, those who are weak, vulnerable, and most in need deserve preferential concern. A basic moral test for any society is how it treats those who are the most vulnerable. This preferential option for the poor and the vulnerable includes all who are marginalized in our nation and beyond: unborn children, persons with disabilities, the elderly and terminally ill, victims of injustice and oppression, and immigrants. And so you see these four principles all come together. The bishops are trying to articulate positions that flow from these four principles, and regardless of political platform, we're encouraged to think along these lines. And so, Matthew, I'm sorry. I thought I was going to set you up better, but those are facts, okay? Okay, don't turn us off. Matthew's going to bring the thunder and lightning. We're going to go for a lively second half. I really thought it was going to be more interesting on, So, buddy, you got to get him back.
All right. Well, I just want to begin by saying Father Mike and I are not morons. Now, I'm not allowing any rebuttal by anybody in the room right now, but we are not. We recognize the fact that when we are asked a question like, in this election, how are Catholics supposed to vote? I do not believe that what Father Mike or I say is necessarily going to change your vote. I don't necessarily believe that. In our country, people tend to attach themselves to one of our two main political parties. Now, of course, there are other political parties and there are people who certainly support those, but generally speaking, Republican and Democrat tends to dominate people's political thinking. And if you identify as a Democrat or if you identify as a Republican, my guess is that what Father Mike and I say is you're going to take the things that reinforce your belief and say, see, I'm right. And the things that challenge your belief, you're simply going to ignore. So what does that mean? Why would we have this if we didn't think that we were going to in any way have any effect on the way that you think? Well, I asked for this last section of our question and answer so that I could speak a little bit about challenging the very notion that every time we get into the voting booth, we have to simply choose the lesser of two evils. Okay, I've got two parties, both of them offend my faith at some level. I just have to pick the one that offends it the least. What a tragedy. Why aren't Catholics changing the very landscape upon which these political parties build their platforms? And so what I'm saying to you is, let's say that you're a Democrat and you're very committed to that. My father was a union man and I belong to the teachers union and all these things. I'm committed to being a Democrat, but I'm also a very devout Catholic. Okay, taking that as a given, I'm not going to shake it. For the love of God, and I do actually mean for the love of God, use your voice among the Democrats to help shake apart their love for abortion, their assault on marriage. If you are a devout Catholic, then by all means shift your party so that they are not such an affront to your faith. If you are a Republican, Father, I believe in low taxes. I believe in small government. I believe in these things, and some of these are strong Catholic principles like subsidiarity. Fine. I don't expect that you're necessarily going to shift because of me. But can't you help the Republicans to look at the environment as an important issue and actually foster more environmentalism among conservatives? Isn't it funny that conservation would not be a conservative principle? We have to move these parties so that they have to adjust to us. You know, during the season of Lent, I go down the street and every single restaurant is having a fish special on Friday. Why is that? Because Catholics are eating fish on Fridays during Lent. The society itself is transformed because of us. Why, for the love of God, aren't we doing that to our political parties? In the United States, we seem to have this feeling that if I show any weakness at all, if I'm a Republican and I admit that there are some flaws in the Republican Party, well, that's just going to disrupt everything and we're going to lose everything. Well, if I'm a Democrat and I admit the fact that there are some things in the Democratic platform that are overtly offensive to my faith, well, then I'm just going to be tearing down my own side. When did it become okay for us to be converted by the world and not us converting the world? You want to be a Democrat? Convert the Democrats and help them to embrace the gospel of life. Help them to embrace subsidiarity. Not everything has to be federal or a United Nation. Things can be local. If you are a Republican, not everything has to be about money and low taxes and the economy. It doesn't all have to be that way. We have values. We stand up for the poor. We stand up for the environment. Is there a way that we can protect the environment without harming the poor, without harming the economy? You know, I don't think anybody cares because the environmentalists don't care who gets hurt, and those who are not environmentalists don't really care about the environment. And the question is, what the heck are Catholics doing? How are we allowing this to go on? I can remember in my own lifetime voting a couple times in primaries, whether it be for a pro-life Democrat, so that the Democrats can hear the fact that some Democrats are in favor of life and don't want that they're completely owned and paid for by Planned Parenthood. I've also voted in Republican primaries when I found a candidate who was against the death penalty, one that wasn't interested in starting all sorts of wars around the globe, one that actually talks about the poor and how to build them up. Look, we may disagree, and Republicans and Democrats may always disagree on, well, what should be the percentage tax that should be put on the wealthy? Well, you say it should be 60 and I say it should be 20. Okay, that's a debate that we can have. But a Catholic should never, ever compromise his values for the sake of this partisan debate. God bless you. If you're a Republican, vote Republican, but do so in a way that your voice gets heard and that you begin to influence your party towards a more moral position. If you're a Democrat and you are entrenched in your Democrat politics, for goodness sake, raise your voice. Go to caucuses, become involved in your party, and shift the balance so that it's no longer a Catholic having to go into the voting booth and saying, well, no matter what I do, I'm committing a sin because I'm voting for somebody who's horrible. How did we allow this to happen? How did Catholics allow themselves to be bullied into this false dichotomy? Well, I have to choose this evil or this evil. I don't have any choice. No, our choice is we proclaim the gospel. Democrats support life. Republicans support the poor. Republicans support the environment. Democrats let go of big government. All of these things we can do if only we stand for our values instead of tying ourselves to a party as if it were a religion. My brothers and sisters, you follow Christ. first and foremost, be a light for Christ among the Republicans. Be a light for Christ among the Democrats. Win them for the gospel. Change policies, change platforms, go to conventions, be active. I can tell you, if one of the parties were to let go of their anti-Catholic positions, I could tell you Catholics would flock to them. Imagine how many Democrats there would be if we no longer had to talk about the sanctity of marriage or the sanctity of life issues in the Democratic Party. Imagine if Republicans were lifting up the poor, if they were caring for the environment, if they were imagine all the Catholics who would say, well, now I can support them. If one of these parties had a living brain cell left in their head, they would listen to the voices of Catholics that would say, we are ready to vote for goodness and righteousness and for the gospel, if only the parties will start to listen. So while Father Mike certainly laid out for you very important principles, do not compromise those principles at any level. But we have to do more than that. We have to fight for those principles, not against the other guys, but among our guys. Be an instrument of change within your own party. I'm not calling you to change parties. I'm calling you to change your party. And if you do that through the power of the gospel, we can go into the voting booth and bring down that lever with great joy, with great conviction. I have made a good and holy choice. When's the last time you felt that way when you voted? I've made a good and holy choice. I can certainly tell you it's been once or twice for me. Most of the time it's, I really want to see things change. It's one of the reasons why I'm a preacher. Because I want to convert people to these important principles that Father Mike talked about. If we convert people, then we begin to see things change. If we as a church stand for those who are downtrodden, for those who are in need, for the immigrant, for the unborn, for the sanctity of marriage, if we stand for these things, they'll have to change, just like they serve fish on Fridays. My brothers and sisters, we can make a difference not only in how we vote, but in how we practice our politics to make the voting better and holier for everyone. Be a source of change and inspiration so that both parties can be transformed. And if they both don't listen and one does, well, then that's where we end up. The one that finally listens to the Catholic voice and lifts up the values that we hold as sacred. My brothers and sisters, be the source of change, not just in your voting, but by evangelizing and proclaiming the gospel through your voting and through your political activism. My brothers and sisters, I hope that this provides you with some guidance. We're not telling you who to vote for in the next couple of days if you haven't already voted, but what we are telling you is stand for your faith. Do so with conviction and be an instrument of change that helps to bring the values of Christ back to our society so that it's not the lesser of two evils, but rather really the support of holy and righteous policies. We do want to thank you for joining us again. We do want to encourage you. Hopefully there's information on the screen right now telling you how you can send your questions to us. Do know that Father Mike and I will be taking turns some. This episode was a little different because we only covered one question. Sometimes if it's a big one, we'll do that. But in some of them, we'll actually be able to cover multiple questions. So please keep those questions coming, large or small. And Father Mike and I will hopefully be able to help you to find the answers, not just because we said so, but because we lead you to the answer, Jesus Christ, who is the way and the truth and the life.